It's time for Supply Chain Now. Broadcasting live from the supply chain capital of the country, Atlanta, Georgia. Heard around the world, Supply Chain Now spotlights the best in all things supply chain. The people, the technologies, the best practices, and the critical issues of the day. And now, here are your hosts.
Hey, good afternoon. Scott Luton here with you on Supply Chain Now. Welcome back to the show. On today's episode, we're speaking with one of the leading news providers in the world. In fact, they provide the first word in business news. This interview is part of our continuing collaboration with the Automotive Industry Action Group. In fact, today's guest is one of the speakers at the AIAG Corporate Responsibility Summit. So stay tuned as we look to increase your supply chain IQ. Quick programming note before we get started. If you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to find us and subscribe wherever you get your podcast from. I want to welcome in my fearless co-host on today's show once again, Greg White, serial supply chain tech entrepreneur and trusted advisor. Hey, Greg, how you doing?
I'm doing well. This has been a busy day.
It's been a busy day. Busy day and a busy series with all the content we've been putting together for what, by all accounts, has been a home run corporate responsibility summit.
Yeah, we got to talk with Al and Lasidra today as well, and everyone's going to get to see their performance. Let's call it a performance. What do you say? and it's been great talking with everyone who is doing or facilitating or pleading for like initiatives, that we talked about with Al today. So look, this is a good cause. Glad to see it happening. Of course, glad to have folks who care about contributing to this corporate responsibility initiative.
That's right. Lots of action-focused leaders that are making things happen. So want to welcome in our featured guest for this segment, Mr. Eric Kane, Senior ESG Analyst with Bloomberg Intelligence. Eric, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, we appreciate it. Great to connect with you. I'm sure you've got several full plates right now, tackling the world as it seemingly changes hour by hour, if not minute by minute. So thanks for carving some time out with us.
It's my pleasure.
So, Greg, we want to get to know Eric a little better, like we typically do with each of these episodes. So for starters, Eric, before we kind of dive into the world of Bloomberg and what you do, tell us more about who you are and where you're from, and maybe give us a Reader's Digest version of your journey leading up to your Bloomberg role.
Sure, I'd be happy to. I've been working in the ESG space for over a decade now. I started my ESG journey, if you will, with a startup at the time called Innovest Strategic Value Advisors. The company was one of the pioneers in the ESG research and rating space. It was ultimately acquired by RiskMetrics and then ultimately by MSCI. So the work that we were doing there kind of forms the backbone of some of the MSCI work. From there, I actually left the ESG sustainability space for a little while, but then reemerged to help the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board get off the ground. Was one of the first employees there on the research side, and initiated coverage for healthcare and financials, and helped that organization kind of develop their research platform. And was with them for several years, and then ultimately joined Bloomberg Intelligence in the fall of 2018, and I've been there for about a year and a half now. And my focus continues to be on ESG, and extremely happy to be in the role that I'm in now.
So you've been a trailblazer of sorts in many ways, helping organizations, it sounds like, develop their own approach in this ESG space, which we should define. We love our acronyms in business and certainly in supply chain. ESG is environmental, social, and governance. Is that right?
That is correct, yes. And I have been, very fortunate to be at a lot of great organizations, kind of at the beginning of their journey. So I do feel I've had an opportunity to kind of blaze a trail a little bit. And it's been an exciting time. Obviously, there's a tremendous amount of growth that's happened over the last decade or so in terms of ESG, not only in terms of the amount of information that's available, but how that information is viewed and who it's viewed by. So it's an extremely exciting time, and I'm very fortunate to be part of the conversation.
Yep.
So what you do is a part of Bloomberg Intelligence, which is also a part of Bloomberg Professional Services, I think. Those two are related, correct?
That is correct, yes. Bloomberg Intelligence is a group within Bloomberg, yep.
Yeah, and you work with a lot of companies in a lot of countries. So tell us a little bit about that, the scale of your work, and then a little bit about, what it is that specifically that you do, and how do companies consume or use what you provide? Sure,
happy to. So perhaps I'll take a little bit of a step back and give an overview of Bloomberg Intelligence, and then can talk about what the role that the ESG team provides within that. So Bloomberg Intelligence, or BI, as we typically refer to it as, provides in-depth research and data on industries and companies, as well as the government, ESG, credit, and litigation factors. And the idea, of course, is that all of this information is useful in that we're defining really what can impact business decisions. So we cover over 135 industries, over 1,900 companies, and our work is backed by over 300 third-party data providers. We're extremely fortunate in that our overall team is made up of over 280 research professionals. So it's a really strong and globally oriented team, and of course, as you suggested, our research is available to Bloomberg clients on the Bloomberg terminal. Within that, the ESG team really focuses on a couple kind of key areas. We develop industry-specific analysis where we look at a given industry, we'll identify issues that we ultimately think are material or impact business, and we'll provide research on that. The research really highlights what we think investors should know, information that we believe to be decision useful. We also look at a lot of themes that we think are impacting the market. So you could think of certain examples that perhaps aren't specific to a given industry, such as decarbonization, and something that of course we continue to look at across multiple industries. And we also provide our clients with a sense of what's driving the ESG markets and how they're performing. So we do a lot of research on different ESG ETFs, for example, and compare how they're doing relative to their non-ESG variants. And I think it's important to note that the team has grown significantly in the last 18 months since I've been part of it. We were 2 when I started. We're 5 now, and we continue to expand. So there's really a lot of interest not only within the company but on the part of our clients, and we continue to build new data sets and new analysis and research to meet the demands of our clients.
I see that you guys provide a dashboard, and I know we've talked to several folks who have similar data. I wonder if they use your data, like Bruno Sarda and his organization. Do you know? So how do these companies use this data? I mean, it sounds like there might be a use for some of the facilitators of change, as well as the companies who hope to know where they stand or know where they're headed, or where to target their efforts.
Absolutely. We really see the service and the data that we provide and the research that we provide as being useful for all the parties that you just alluded to, so investors and also the corporates themselves who may be looking, as you suggested, to see how they rank, relative to peers and what some key issues they might want to focus on are. And of course, there are a number of other parties, everyone from academics to NGOs who utilize our data as well. So I can't speak, directly to specific clients who use the data, but in general, our ESG data covers about 500 or so different data points for several thousand companies. Mm-hmm. So we really do think that it's one of the most comprehensive, if not the most comprehensive, sources of ESG data available, and that's tremendously powerful. And of course, one of the things that kind of separates our work from perhaps that of others is we provide full transparency behind the data. So if someone is looking at the data available on Terminal, you can kind of click right through that data to the source document. So we do know that historically ESG data has kind of varied in terms of quality and comparability. So having that sort of transparency to the source is certainly extremely useful in ensuring that it is accurate, and also looking to see what the context around that data might be.
Yeah, so a particular company can determine how useful or how pointed it is at their particular concern or problem or curiosity, right?
Absolutely, and they can look to see that they could identify peers and look to see where their peers are with respect to a certain issue. Just to name one that I mentioned earlier, which relates, of course, to climate change. We know that's a big area of interest, kind of across autos and other industries. So certainly we provide, a useful tool for companies to benchmark where they are, not only in terms of current emissions, but also historic emissions, and also setting targets to decarbonize going forward.
Yeah, I see that. I see where you can rank them against their peers and rank them against themselves historically. And it's pretty simple. Yep. I mean, when you look at it, it's pretty simple to tell where you stand and whether you're progressing or regressing.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, that's useful.
So let's, speaking of the 500 data points for several thousand companies, gosh, I can only imagine the wealth of information at your growing team's fingertips. So let's broaden out a little bit more. So when you're looking, obviously it goes without saying these are challenging times for so many people economically, health-wise. Certainly the supply chain industry and all of its many facets, these have been really challenging times. With that backdrop, what is in particular an issue or a news story or development, one or two of them, that you and your team have been tracking more than others here in recent weeks?
Sure. I think the coronavirus, has kind of taken over recently. That's something, obviously, with its impact on the markets. We've been looking to see how ESG investments have been kind of faring in this market. And then we, of course, have also been looking to see how the change in kind of business activity across all businesses has impacted things like greenhouse gas emissions and air pollution, just to give a sense of what the kind of physical changes are and how that has implications for the environment. So that really relates, of course, to our ongoing examination of climate and the risks and opportunities there.
Well, so we've been surprised, and through a variety of interviewees on our shows and over the last 45 days or so, Greg, it seems like there's been a common thread of organizations and leaders and investment firms not being overly opportunistic, but finding opportunity and deals and solid investments despite the environment. Is that kind of what you've been seeing as well, Greg?
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I think if I think about the theme we've seen evolving, first of all, this has given people recognition of the impact we do have on the environment because, no planes flying over. We talked with Al Hildreth, and he was talking about the canals in Venice being clean enough to swim in. And I think people can see the impact that we have on the environment every day, but also companies are seeing opportunity. I mean, there's still investments being made if you're in the right type of industry, and there are opportunities where companies can join together and advance the economic condition of both, and also companies are using this time to become really, really aware of their environmental impact. And I think that this isn't, strangely, an opportune time for this particular conference, this summit, to be going on with everyone having a newfound awareness of environmental impact.
Hey, Eric, I want to get you to kind of respond to that initially, and then I've got one follow-up question for you related to the wide realm of ESG. So from any insights from an investment, a deal making, anything Greg just shared there?
Sure. I think it's absolutely right that the slowdown in certain business activities has kind of shed a light on what things look like, perhaps in a less kind of carbon intensive world, which is certainly interesting. That, of course, has implications for a variety of different issues that we cover, whether it's the future of carbon pricing. We of course see an impact on oil prices, which is interesting when we start to think about how different companies are transitioning away from oil and towards less carbon intensive forms of energy, and perhaps how these sorts of market factors might ultimately kind of drive that change perhaps a little faster than we anticipated. So there's certainly a lot to follow, and I think it's going to be an interesting several months, if not years, to see what these impacts really kind of play out to be over the near and long term. Agreed.
So within the ESG space, that entails so much, especially in today's environment. What is one subject or topic or issue or challenge that you like reporting and analyzing the most? Is there one that really sticks out?
There is, and I think it really is climate, and the efforts towards decarbonization. I think it's been a particular interest of mine since I began in the field over a decade ago, and it's one that I think has also really kind of captured the most attention within ESG over the last several years. So we've worked extensively on the issue at BI. We developed a new data set about a year ago where we actually looked to see if we could translate the different greenhouse gas reduction targets that companies state into kind of a common language, if you will, and then forecast performance out to 2030. And that data set covers over 500 companies right now, so it's something we're extremely excited about. We actually just updated that data, and we've had a lot of good response, to that data from clients and other people. So it's certainly a space that continues to evolve and one that continues to attract a lot of attention. And it seems like almost on a daily basis, if not a weekly basis, we get more and more companies coming out with really ambitious carbon targets. So just sticking with the oil and gas industry as an example, we saw last week that Shell came out with a new target, and we've seen a number of the integrated oil and gas companies, especially in Europe, come out with ambitions for carbon neutrality, which really, in our mind, kind of suggests that they're looking to really transition their business from oil, which is obviously carbon intensive, to renewable energy and far less carbon intensive forms of energy. So it's an extremely exciting time, and that's certainly an issue that I've enjoyed covering.
what also seems, generally speaking, in recent years, that consumers as well as investors have taken a greater and greater interest in ESG-related topics. And of course, all three of us know about the triple bottom line and how more and more companies are looking at those and how they interplay with each other, right? Greg, you made a great point earlier today when we were interviewing Lasidra and Al about how we can make a lot of the change more sustainable by making the financial business case for it, right?
Yeah, we find that the hurdle for implementing some of the change that we're talking about here is not insubstantial, but it also has a diminishing cost over time, just like when you implement any other new technology or new business process or that sort of thing. It can be cost effective, and to motivate companies which have to make a profit, that's how companies keep people employed and please their shareholders. To be economically feasible it's the way to get these initiatives working. And I really think, and you said it earlier today, Scott, the people are figuring that out. And rather than demanding instantaneous change without solution, they are working together to find economical waypoints to get to a solution over time, rather than one saying you must and the other party saying we won't, right? So I think we're seeing a lot of progress in that regard and a lot of recognition with anyone who cares about these topics.
Which should give a ton of more fodder, Eric, for you and your team to digest and analyze and stand up new data groups and offer even more very valuable insights to the thousands of companies that your information is helping guide their decision making.
Absolutely. And, to the point that Greg made a few seconds ago, one of the exciting developments that we saw last year was the Business Roundtable's revised statement on the purpose of the corporation. So that was something that was signed by over 180 CEOs from different companies, including Amazon, Citigroup, Walmart, et cetera, where they essentially said that, the purpose of their corporation should be modified so that it's clear that these companies exist for the benefit of all stakeholders, not just shareholders. So I think, that sort of development really does kind of emphasize the point that Greg made and indicate, that companies are taking these issues seriously. They're willing to kind of revise their mission statements, if you will. And, we're continuing to track kind of what that means, not only on, the broad level, but when we look at specific companies within that group, how they're actually kind of, actioning that statement. So it's an extremely exciting time.
It is. Deeds, not words, is one of the phrases that we like to say around here. All about action. Don't give us lip service. Go out there and lead. And that's what we like to see. And clearly there's a lot of action-based leadership, both in general. We're seeing more and more in this space. But, I hate to belabor a point, but Greg, we've seen it in each of these conversations we've been having. And on that note, I should mention, in case anyone is tuning into this episode and didn't check out the earlier one, when we referenced Lasidra and Al, we were talking about Al Hildreth, Global Energy Manager at General Motors, who's doing some big things in this space, as well as Lasidra Welch, who is a Program Manager for Environmental Sustainability with AIAG, which we're going to talk about in just a moment. Greg, you were going to say something?
I just think it's it's important for companies to recognize that their brand identity and their esteem in the marketplace is now based on how they conduct themselves in business and how their business partners conduct themselves in business. If you think about sustainability, fair trade, things like forced labor, euphemism for slavery, it's very easy to discover that these things are occurring, and brands have to recognize that their stakeholders are not just their shareholders, as you said, Eric, and and that their brand equity is a big part of their overall equity. And in order to maintain, even if they only do it for selfish reasons, I don't care, just as long as they do it. But maintaining that brand equity is important, is an important part of producing profit and shareholder value and stakeholder esteem. So,
stakeholder esteem, I love that. All right, so Eric, I want you to appreciate what you're doing with AIAG and looking forward to your comments as part of your keynote there. But talk to the value of getting engaged and participating in AIAG.
Sure. So very excited to be part of the virtual conference next week. I think there's a tremendous amount of value, of course, in engaging in a group like this and an event like this. I think first and foremost, from my standpoint, it's an opportunity for us to really help the attendees understand how some of the ESG data that we look at, collect, analyze is ultimately being used to make decisions. And I think, that sort of insight can ultimately help, folks in the group understand, the value of disclosing the data, the value of making sure that the data is comparable, and to understand really how, their stakeholders might use the data. So it's a tremendous opportunity for us. And I think, groups like AIAG are essential in this kind of sustainability journey that many of us are on, because the sharing of ideas, the sharing of experiences really kind of is critical in us getting to the point where I think we all want to be, where we have, standardized data to evaluate companies. We have, standardized procedures. We have companies sharing best practices, and seeing those best practices kind of trickle down throughout supply chains and across industries. So it's very exciting, and I'm honored to be part of it.
Outstanding. We are too. We are too. Automotive Industry Action Group, and as Greg said earlier today, action being the operative word, and love that. Greg, any follow-up points about AIAG based on what Eric just shared there?
Gosh, I'm thinking about the fact that a lot of people will listen to a lot of these episodes, and they'll probably hear me say this over and over again, but this is a really timely initiative by AIAG, and I think also an example of leadership in terms of switching from a physical event to a virtual event and then making the event free to all, maybe a free for all, but certainly free to all. And, that to me, that is one of their many actions that speaks volumes.
Agreed. Absolutely. And looking forward to, as one of the follow-ups, Eric and Greg, coming out of the Corporate Responsibility Summit, we're going to be featuring a member of the AIAG or two to share some of the key takeaways from all of these, these thought leaders are getting together and not only sharing best practices for what's working in their neck of the woods, but, sharing and probably debating some of the topics. As we talked about through a lot of these conversations or a lot of these episodes, you've got to have the passionate and at times disagreeable conversations to move the whole industry forward. That's how it happens. So, all right. So Eric, we want to make sure that our listeners know how to connect with you in case they want to compare notes or check out some of your work and some of your new projects, and of course how they can learn more about Bloomberg Intelligence.
Sure. Certainly happy to hear from listeners. We're always excited to engage on these topics. Our research is available, of course, on the Bloomberg terminal. If folks are interested in getting a demo for the terminal, they can find out all the necessary information on Bloomberg.com. And folks can also reach out to me directly. My email address is ekane, the number 19 at bloomberg.net.
Outstanding. Good stuff here, Eric. Thanks so much for joining us. I know you're busy and challenging times for all, but I really enjoyed your perspective here, and want to say big thanks to Eric Kane, Senior ESG Analyst with Bloomberg Intelligence. And don't take off just yet as we wrap up here. Greg, big key takeaway from this conversation.
This really drives home the point how pervasive the importance of corporate responsibility, environmental awareness, fair trade, all of those things are. I mean, when you talk to one of the biggest investment media organizations, in addition to the largest automaker in the world in the same day, it really lets you know what the scale and scope of this initiative is. And I think that bodes well for the future of our planet.
Agreed. Absolutely. Well, we're going to leave it there for this episode. Really enjoyed talking with Eric Kane with Bloomberg Intelligence. All the best to you, Eric. Looking forward to seeing you at the event coming up here. And Greg, to our audience, be sure to check out a wide variety of industry thought leadership at supplychainnowradio.com. Find us and subscribe wherever you get your podcast from. On behalf of the entire team, Scott Luton here, wishing you a successful week ahead. Stay safe. Know this, brighter days certainly lie ahead. And with that duly noted, we'll see you next time here on Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.